The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles above the clouds of Nexus Prime. Representatives from 847 different worlds sat in floating pods, their voices creating a constant hum of discussion. Ambassador walked slowly down the center aisle, his black shoes clicking against the crystal floor. He carried a simple briefcase and wore the same dark suit he had worn for the past 5 years. The other species barely looked at him. To them, humans were just another member race. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. Took his seat in pod 847, the last one added to the council chamber. Earth had joined the galactic community 37 years ago, and they had been model citizens ever since. They followed every rule. They paid their taxes. They never caused trouble. The trade dispute between the mining consortium and the Altair Belt workers has been resolved, announced council speaker. The tall, blue-skinned alien's voice echoed through the chamber. Ambassador, your species' agricultural output for this quarter exceeded expectations by 12%. Nodded politely, we are pleased to serve the community. Several nearby representatives made small sounds of approval. Humans were good workers. They grew food well. They built things that lasted, but they were not warriors. They had no great fleets. Their technology was decent but not remarkable. What the galaxy did not know was that every human ship, every human colony, every human trade station was carefully planned. On Earth, deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, a group of humans met in secret every week. They called themselves the Shadow Cabinet. General Martinez spread star charts across the metal table. Colony ships Delta 7 through Delta 12 are in position, she said. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes were sharp as knives. If anyone attacks our people, we can respond within 6 hours. Dr. Sarah, the head of Human Scientific Development, touched her tablet. The new weapon systems are ready. The galaxy thinks our mining equipment is just for digging rocks. Defense Minister Jackson leaned forward. What about the council? Do they suspect anything? Is doing his job perfectly, Martinez replied. They think we are peaceful farmers who got lucky with technology. They have no idea what humans can really do. The Shadow Cabinet had been planning for this day since first contact. They remembered Earth's history. They remembered what happened when strong nations attacked weak ones. They would not let that happen to humanity. On the farming world of New Osaka, colonist Maria Santos picked apples from the trees her grandfather had planted. The red fruits were perfect, genetically designed to grow in the alien soil. Around her, 2 million humans lived quiet, peaceful lives. They had schools and parks and small cafes where people met to talk about the weather. Maria did not know that beneath her feet, in tunnels carved from solid rock, machines waited in silence. These machines could turn New Osaka into a fortress in less than an hour. Every human world had the same hidden defenses. In space above New Osaka, the cargo ship Harmony drifted between the orbital platforms. Captain Williams checked his screens one more time. Everything looked normal. The ship was loaded with grain and vegetables bound for the core worlds. What the shipping manifests did not show was that the Harmony's hull was made from materials stronger than anything in the galaxy. Its engines could outrun any known warship. And hidden in the cargo bays, behind walls of grain sacks, were weapons that could destroy battle cruisers. Captain Williams was a former naval officer. So were most of the merchant captains in the human fleet. They wore civilian clothes and smiled at customs inspectors, but they remembered their training. They practiced combat drills when no one was watching. Back on Earth, President finished reading the daily reports. Human colonies were thriving, trade was profitable, relations with other species were friendly, everything looked peaceful. She walked to the window of her office and stared at the blue sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds, alien ships moved between the stars. Most of them belonged to species that had never known war. They had joined the Galactic Council when they developed space travel. They traded resources and knowledge. They solved problems with words. But President knew that not every species was peaceful. The reports from the Outer Rim worried her. The hegemony was growing stronger. They conquered weaker worlds and enslaved the populations. The Council sent them angry messages but did nothing more. "They will test us someday," she said to her empty office. "And when they do, they will learn what humans really are." At the edge of known space, a scouting ship watched human trade routes. Commander Ha studied the data with interest. Human ships were slow. Human colonies had minimal defenses. Human technology was adequate but nothing special. "They would make good slaves," he told his second in command. "Their worlds are rich. Their people seem soft." They had conquered 17 species in the past century. Each time, they chose targets that looked weak. Each time, the Galactic Council complained but did nothing. The Council preferred words to weapons. Ha made his decision. He would recommend New Osaka as their next target. The human colony world was isolated and poorly defended. It would fall quickly. And when it did, the galaxy would see that the Council's protection was meaningless. He did not know that his ship's communications had been quietly monitored for months. On Earth, computers translated every word he spoke. The Shadow Cabinet read every report he filed. General Martinez smiled grimly as she read the latest intelligence. "They are planning something," she told the others. "New Osaka is their primary target." "Should we warn the colonists?" asked Dr. "No," Martinez replied. "If we evacuate now, they will choose a different target. Better to let them come to us. We are ready." Minister Jackson nodded. "The sheep will finally see the wolf's teeth." Far above Earth, the stars shone peacefully. Alien ships moved along trade routes that humans had helped establish. The galaxy continued its ancient rhythms of commerce and diplomacy. But deep in the shadows, humanity prepared for war. The alarm started at 6:47 local time on New Osaka. Maria Santos was making breakfast when the emergency signal echoed across the colony. She dropped her coffee cup and ran to the window. In the sky above, dark shapes moved like storm clouds. Warships. The vessels were massive and ugly, covered in spikes and weapon ports. They moved in perfect formation, blocking out the morning sun. Maria counted 12 heavy cruisers and dozens of smaller attack craft, more ships than the entire human colonial defense force. "All civilians report to designated shelters immediately," the loudspeakers announced. "This is not a drill." Maria grabbed her emergency bag and ran outside. Her neighbors were already moving toward the underground bunkers. Children cried. Adults tried to stay calm. Everyone knew the stories about what happened to worlds they conquered. In orbit, Commander Ha watched the panicking humans with satisfaction. "Begin the bombardment," he ordered. "Target their communication centers first, then the power plants. Leave the food production areas intact. We will need them." The first energy blast struck New Osaka's main city. Buildings collapsed in clouds of dust and fire. The planetary defense grid fired back, but the human weapons were too weak. The shields absorbed the attacks easily. "They are not even trying to fight," laughed Ha's second in command. "This will be over in hours." On Earth, the Shadow Cabinet watched everything through hidden cameras on New Osaka. General Martinez's hands were clenched into fists. Doctor stared at the screens with tears in her eyes. They could see their people dying, but they could not act yet. "The plan requires the galaxy to see this," Martinez said quietly. "If we respond too quickly, the other species will think we were hiding military assets. They need to believe we are victims first." At the Galactic Council, emergency sessions began immediately. Ambassador sat in his pod while other representatives argued loudly. The delegate demanded military intervention. The representative called for economic sanctions. The council speaker tried to maintain order. "They have clearly violated the non-aggression treaty," announced Speaker. We will send a formal protest and demand they withdraw immediately." A protest. His voice was barely above a whisper. "My people are dying and you want to send a letter." The ambassador made a dismissive gesture. "Ambassador, we understand your concern, but military action would only escalate the situation. The Council has maintained peace for 2,000 years through diplomacy." Looked around the chamber. He saw fear in some faces, indifference in others. None of them understood. They had never faced real evil. They thought words could stop monsters. On New Osaka, the ground forces landed. They moved through the city in powered armor, their insect faces hidden behind metal masks. Maria Santos huddled in the shelter with 50 other colonists. They could hear the sound of marching feet above. The shelter door exploded inward. Soldiers poured inside, their weapons aimed at the terrified humans. The lead soldier spoke in broken standard. "You come now. Work for hegemony. Resist and die." Maria was pushed outside with the others. In the streets, she saw the true horror of the invasion. Humans were being herded into groups. Some were loaded onto transport ships. Others were taken to processing centers where scientists waited with surgical tools. "We need workers," explained an officer to his soldiers. "The weak ones will be processed for biomass. The strong ones will serve in the mines." The invasion was being broadcast across the galaxy. Military doctrine included psychological warfare. They wanted other species to see what happened to those who could not defend themselves. In the council chamber, delegates watched the footage in shocked silence. Children being separated from parents. Scientists being tortured for information. Entire city blocks being stripped of anything valuable. Stood up slowly. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. 23 hours ago, New Osaka had a population of 2.3 million humans. How many are still alive? "Ambassador, please," said the speaker. "We are doing everything we can through proper channels." "Proper channels," repeated. He looked at each delegate in turn. "My species has been part of this council for 37 years. We have followed every law, paid every tax, helped every world that asked for aid, and when we needed help you gave us words." The delegate tried to speak. "You must understand the complexity of the situation." "No," his voice grew louder. "You must understand something about my species. We told you what we were before we told you who we had become. We tried to be better. We tried to be peaceful. We thought civilization meant something here." He picked up his briefcase and walked toward the exit. Every eye in the chamber followed him. At the door, he turned back one final time. "For 37 years, we have been good citizens of your galaxy. We have been patient. We have been kind. We have been everything you wanted us to be." His voice became very quiet. "That ends today." The chamber erupted in confused voices as left. Some delegates called for him to return. Others demanded sanctions against Earth for his disrespectful behavior. None of them understood what they had just witnessed. On New Osaka, the slaughter continued. Commander Haas supervised the harvest personally. Human technology was being dismantled and loaded onto cargo ships. Human prisoners were being sorted by age and strength. The valuable ones would be sold as slaves. The rest would become food. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth." "Put it through," Ha ordered. The message was simple and came from someone who identified himself only as Shadow Cabinet Authorization 777. The voice was cold and mechanical. "You have 72 hours to withdraw from New Osaka and return all human prisoners unharmed. This is your only warning." Ha laughed so hard his insect mandibles clicked together. "A threat? From farmers? Tell Earth that if they want their people back, they can pay ransom like everyone else." The transmission ended. Around him, soldiers continued their work. They had done this many times before. They would strip New Osaka bare and move on to the next target. The humans would learn to accept their new place in the galaxy. What Ha did not know was that across human space, codes were being transmitted. Colonial governors were opening sealed orders they had carried for decades. Ship captains were receiving new destination coordinates. Scientists were activating equipment that officially did not exist. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between choosing peace and being capable of war. The 72-hour countdown had begun. 60 hours after the ultimatum, strange things began happening across human space. On 17 different worlds, colonial governors activated emergency protocols that most residents did not know existed. Trade ships suddenly changed course toward unknown destinations. Mining stations went silent, their automated distress signals the only sign that anything had changed. Captain Williams of the cargo ship Harmony received his orders while docked at station. The message came through channels he had not used in 20 years. 3 simple words: Shadow Protocol active. Williams dismissed his civilian crew with full pay and bonuses. Then he opened sealed compartments throughout his ship. The grain storage areas folded away to reveal missile launchers. The navigation computer switched to military encryption. The ship's hull began extending additional weapon ports. Within 6 hours, the Harmony had transformed from a peaceful merchant vessel into something the galaxy had never seen. Its weapons could punch through capital ship armor. Its shields could deflect entire fleet bombardments. Its engines could bend space itself. Williams was not alone. Across human space, 3,000 ships were shedding their peaceful disguises. At Galactic Council headquarters, the first reports created confusion and panic. The Trade Monitoring Station detected massive energy signatures moving toward the outer rim. Ships that registered as human merchant vessels were showing power readings impossible for civilian craft. "This must be sensor error," insisted the duty officer. "No known technology can generate those readings." But the sensors were working perfectly. They were simply recording something beyond their understanding. Dr. Sarah stood in the hidden command center beneath Colorado. Around her, screens showed the deployment of humanity's true fleet. Ships that had masqueraded as cargo haulers for decades now revealed their true purpose. Each vessel carried weapons that human scientists had been developing for 37 years. "Phase 1 is complete," she reported to General Martinez. "All assets are moving to assembly points. The fleet will be in position within 12 hours. Martinez nodded grimly. "Any word from the—" "They are still demanding ransom for our people. Commander Ha sent a message calling humans pathetic farmers who should know their place." "He will learn," Martinez replied. "What about the council?" "Chaos. They are trying to understand what they are seeing. Some delegates are demanding explanations. Others are calling for investigations into human activities." On New Osaka, the killing continued. Maria Santos had been selected for processing. She stood in line with 200 other colonists, waiting her turn at the facility. Through the windows, she could see the orbital bombardment continuing. Her world was dying piece by piece. But something was different about this morning. The guards seemed nervous. They kept checking their communication devices and looking at the sky. "Sir," a technician called to Commander Ha, "we are detecting unknown ships approaching the system. Multiple contacts, moving at impossible speeds." Ha studied the sensor displays. "How many ships?" "Difficult to determine, sir. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. At least 300 vessels, possibly more." "Impossible. Human merchant fleets do not have 300 ships, and these power readings make no sense." The first human ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They appeared in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver against the stars. Each vessel was massive, larger than battleships but sleeker and more elegant. The lead ship transmitted on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Cross of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. You have 6 hours to release all human prisoners and withdraw from this system. This is your final warning." Ha laughed again, but the sound was forced. One fleet against the entire hegemony force. Humans are even more foolish than we thought. He opened a channel to the human ships. "Admiral Cross, you are outnumbered 50-1. Surrender now and your death will be quick." The response came immediately. "Commander, you seem to have miscounted. Let us help you with the mathematics." Space around New Osaka suddenly filled with ships, not hundreds, but thousands. They appeared from nowhere, their stealth systems deactivating in perfect synchronization. The massive fleet formed attack formations that stretched across the entire system. "Impossible," whispered Ha's sensor operator. "Where did they come from? Our scouts reported no human military presence." Admiral Cross's voice filled the communication channels again. "You attacked farmers and merchants, Commander. You found soldiers and warriors. Every human world you thought was defenseless has been a fortress. Every cargo ship you ignored was a battleship. Every mining station you dismissed was a weapons platform." The truth struck like a physical blow. For 37 years, humanity had been hiding their true capabilities. They had appeared weak while building the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. At the Galactic Council, delegates watched the displays in stunned silence. The human fleet was larger than the combined navies of the top 10 military powers. Their technology appeared to be centuries ahead of anything previously known. "How did we miss this?" demanded the representative. "Our intelligence services monitor all member species." Ambassador had returned to the council chamber. He stood at his podium with the same calm expression he had worn for years. But now the other delegates saw something different in his eyes, something cold and dangerous. "You missed it because we wanted you to miss it," said quietly. "Every trade agreement we signed was designed to position our ships near strategic locations. Every colony we established was placed to protect vulnerable systems. Every piece of technology we shared was carefully chosen to hide our true capabilities." The speaker's voice shook slightly. "Ambassador, are you saying that humanity has been deceiving the Council for nearly 4 decades?" "No, Speaker. We have been protecting the Council for nearly 4 decades. While you debated and wrote protests, we built the defenses that kept this galaxy safe. Every pirate fleet that mysteriously disappeared was eliminated by human forces. Every plague that suddenly found a cure was solved by human scientists. Every trade route that stayed peaceful was patrolled by our disguised warships." Gestured toward the displays showing the massive fleet. "This is what we are capable of when we stop holding back. This is what we have been preparing for since the day we joined your community. The day when someone would test whether civilization was worth defending." In space above New Osaka, the human fleet waited. Their weapons were charged. Their shields were raised. 3,000 ships hung in perfect formation, ready to demonstrate what happened when humans stopped pretending to be harmless. Commander Ha stared at the overwhelming force arrayed against him. His hands shook as he reached for the communication controls. For the first time in his military career, he was afraid. "Admiral Cross," he transmitted, "perhaps we can discuss terms." The response came immediately. "The time for discussion ended when you chose to murder civilians. You have 5 hours and 57 minutes to release every human prisoner and withdraw your forces. After that, we will show you what human warriors do to those who harm the innocent." The countdown continued, and in the depths of space, humanity prepared to reveal the full extent of their fury. 5 hours and 57 minutes later, Commander Ha made his final mistake. He chose pride over wisdom. "All ships open fire on the human fleet," he ordered. "Show these farmers what real warriors can do." The bombardment was impressive by galactic standards. Energy beams that could crack planets struck the human formations. Missiles capable of destroying entire space stations streaked through the void. For 30 seconds, space around New Osaka blazed with the fury of 1,200 warships. When the light faded, every human ship remained intact. Their shields had absorbed attacks that should have vaporized them. Not one vessel showed damage. Admiral Cross's voice carried across the battlefield with deadly calm. "Thank you for making this simple, Commander. You chose war. Now learn why that was a mistake." The human counterattack began with surgical precision. Instead of returning the massive bombardment, the Terran fleet fired single, focused beams. Each shot struck a specific point on vessels, their weapon systems. Within minutes, the entire hegemony fleet was disarmed but not destroyed. "Impossible," Ha stared at his displays. "Our shields should have stopped those weapons." His science officer was pale with terror. "Sir, the human beams went through our shields as if they were not there. The energy signatures suggest they are manipulating matter at the quantum level." But disarming the fleet was only the beginning. What came next would haunt the galaxy for generations. "Phase 2, Admiral Cross announced to her captains. "Demonstrate human creativity." The first psychological attack came through the communication systems. Every screen in their fleet began showing footage from New Osaka, but not the invasion. Instead, they saw images of human children playing in schools, families eating dinner together, scientists working in laboratories, artists creating beautiful sculptures. "You destroyed this," a human voice said softly over the images. "You murdered people who had never harmed you. You killed children who were learning to read. You tortured scientists who spent their lives healing diseases." The images changed. Now they saw what they had done: bodies in the streets, burning buildings, families torn apart. But the humans had recorded everything with perfect clarity: every death, every scream, every moment of suffering. "This is who you are," the voice continued. "This is what you chose to become, and this is why we will show you no mercy." The psychological warfare was devastating. Ha's soldiers began removing their helmets, unable to bear seeing their own actions. Some started crying, an emotion their species rarely showed. Others began arguing among themselves about the necessity of the invasion. But the humans were just beginning. Dr. Sarah monitored the battle from her command center on Earth. "Deploy the bioweapons," she ordered. The word bioweapons was misleading. The humans had not created diseases to kill their enemies. Instead, they had developed something far more sophisticated and terrifying. Invisible drones launched from human ships and entered vessels through microscopic gaps in their hulls. Once inside, the drones released clouds of nanobots designed specifically for biology. The nanobots did not cause pain or death. They did something worse. They made reproduction impossible. Within hours, every in the system would be sterile. Not just the soldiers, but their entire bloodlines. The nanobots would remain in their systems for life, ensuring that the warriors who had chosen to destroy families would never create families of their own. "You wanted to harvest humans," Admiral Cross transmitted to the fleet. "Instead, you have harvested your own extinction. Your species can survive, but only the individuals currently alive. When you die, there will be no children to replace you." The horror of this punishment struck them like a physical blow. Their entire culture was built on conquest and expansion. The idea of leaving no legacy, no offspring to carry on their warrior traditions, was worse than death itself. But humanity was still not finished. The third phase targeted the command structure. Human intelligence officers had studied their society for decades. They knew exactly how their rigid hierarchy functioned. They understood which information could cause civil wars. Coded transmissions began flowing to different commanders. Each message contained genuine military intelligence about rival factions within the hegemony. Long-buried scandals were revealed. Secret alliances were exposed. Hidden weaknesses were broadcast to enemies. Commander Ha watched in horror as his own subordinates began questioning his orders. Communications from other hegemony fleets showed the same chaos. Units were turning on each other. Admirals were arresting their own officers. The entire military structure was collapsing from within. How did they know? He asked his intelligence officer. These secrets were classified at the highest levels. Sir, the officer replied with a shaking voice, I think they have been watching us for much longer than we realized. They know everything about us. The truth was even worse than that. For 37 years, humanity had been quietly infiltrating every major power in the galaxy. Their merchant ships had carried more than cargo. They had carried the most sophisticated spy network in galactic history. On New Osaka, the ground forces received new orders, but the orders came from 3 different commanders, all claiming to be the legitimate authority. Some units were told to execute the prisoners. Others were ordered to release them. A few received instructions to abandon the planet entirely. Confusion turned to chaos. Soldiers began fighting each other instead of guarding their captives. Maria Santos and the other prisoners found themselves forgotten as their guards argued about conflicting orders. Now comes the final lesson, Admiral Cross announced. The human fleet began moving toward but they did not travel through hyperspace. Instead, they demonstrated technology that made the galaxy's greatest scientists weep with envy. The ships began bending space around them, creating shortcuts through the fabric of reality itself. What should have been a week-long journey took 6 hours. The humans had learned to fold the universe like origami. When they arrived at the hegemony capital system, they found a world of 12 billion citizens. Military bases covered 3 continents. Orbital defense platforms surrounded the planet like a metal shell. Admiral Cross opened communications with the planetary government. This is your final opportunity to surrender. Release all prisoners across your empire. Withdraw from all occupied territories. Submit to galactic justice for your war crimes. The Hegemony High Command refused. They had never surrendered in their species' history. They would not start now. Very well, Cross replied. Since you value power above life, we will show you what true power looks like. The human fleet took positions around but they did not attack the planet itself. Instead, they aimed their weapons at the system's star. What happened next violated every known law of physics. Human technology reached into the heart of the sun and began adjusting its nuclear reactions. The star's energy output decreased by exactly 12%. The effect on them was immediate and dramatic. Temperatures began dropping. The carefully balanced ecosystem that supported 12 billion lives started dying. Ice formed at the polar regions and began spreading toward the equator. You have created an eternal winter, Admiral Cross transmitted to the planet below. Your world will become a frozen wasteland, just as you turned New Osaka into a wasteland of death. The difference is that your people can still escape. Our people could not. The psychological impact was overwhelming. They had always believed their star was eternal and unchangeable. To see humans casually manipulating stellar mechanics was like watching gods reshape reality. How many died on New Osaka? Cross continued. Count carefully. When your population drops to exactly that number, we will restore your sun. Until then, learn what it means to face extinction. Across panic spread faster than the advancing ice. The Hegemony High Command began issuing surrender orders to every fleet in their empire, but it was too late for easy solutions. The humans had not just defeated them militarily. They had broken their spirit, ended their genetic future, and demonstrated that the laws of physics bowed to human will. The galaxy would never again mistake human mercy for human weakness. 3 months after the surrender, representatives from every galactic civilization gathered on Nexus Prime. But this was not a council meeting. The Galactic Council had dissolved the day after humanity demonstrated stellar manipulation. In its place, something new was being born. Ambassador stood at the podium where Speaker once presided. The Great Chamber had been rebuilt to accommodate a different kind of government. Instead of hierarchical tiers, the seats were arranged in concentric circles with Earth's delegation at the center. The old council failed because it believed words could stop monsters, began. His voice carried clearly through the hall. We are here to build something better, something that protects the innocent instead of appeasing the guilty. In the audience, former council members sat beside species that had never been allowed representation before. The flower people, considered too primitive for membership, now had equal voices with the ancient. Humanity's first act had been expanding membership to every sentient species, regardless of their technological development. Dr. Sarah presented the new defensive framework to the assembly. The Terran Protectorate is not an empire, she explained. We do not seek to rule other worlds. We seek to ensure that no world suffers what New Osaka suffered. Behind her, holographic displays showed the new reality of galactic defense. Human ships now patrolled every major trade route. Human scientists worked on every world that requested assistance. Human engineers were upgrading defensive systems across the galaxy. But this comes with conditions, continued. Member worlds must agree to binding arbitration for disputes. They must provide humanitarian aid when requested, and they must never again ignore genocide because it is convenient to do so. The delegate raised a tentative hand. What if we refuse these terms? Admiral Cross, now the Protectorate's military commander, answered calmly. Then you will be outside our protection when the next predator species emerges, and there is always a next predator. The assembled delegates understood the choice they faced. Accept humanity's protection and live under their moral guidance, or face the universe alone when the next like empire arose. Most chose protection. On New Osaka, reconstruction proceeded at an impossible pace. Human construction teams worked alongside volunteers from dozens of species. The city that had been destroyed in hours was being rebuilt in weeks, better and stronger than before. Maria Santos stood in her new home, watching alien workers install quantum-reinforced windows. The engineer seemed embarrassed as he worked. I am sorry, he said quietly. My people voted against intervention when your world was attacked. We were wrong. Maria smiled sadly. You were scared. I understand that, but you learned from your mistakes. That is what matters now. The engineer nodded gratefully and continued his work. Across New Osaka, similar conversations were happening. The galaxy was learning that humanity's forgiveness was as powerful as their fury. But forgiveness came with education. Every species now learned human history as part of their standard curriculum. They studied the wars that had shaped humanity's understanding of evil. They learned about the genocides that had taught humans the cost of inaction. You must understand why we hid our strength, President explained to a gathering of planetary leaders. We had seen what happened when the strong preyed upon the weak. We hoped the galaxy was different. We hoped civilization meant something here. The Prime Minister looked uncomfortable. When did you realize we were the same as your ancient empires? When the first reports of expansion reached us 30 years ago, replied. You wrote protests while they enslaved entire worlds. You held meetings while they committed genocide. You were good people who chose to do nothing while evil flourished. The truth stung, but it was necessary. The galaxy had to understand their complicity in the system that had enabled the atrocities. General Martinez addressed the military leaders separately. We are not here to replace your armed forces, she assured them. We are here to supplement them. Your worlds will maintain their own defenses, but they will be coordinated with our forces to prevent any aggressor from exploiting weaknesses. The new military doctrine was revolutionary. Instead of each world defending only itself, the Protectorate created overlapping defensive zones. An attack on any member world would trigger immediate response from the nearest human fleet and any allied forces in the region. No more isolated targets, Martinez explained. No more weak worlds that predators can pick off one by one. Every world under our protection is connected to every other world. An attack on one becomes an attack on all. This served as a constant reminder of the new reality. The eternal winter continued, but human aid workers were helping the remaining population adapt. Advanced heating systems kept the cities warm. Genetic modification allowed crops to grow in the new climate. It was mercy, but mercy with a message. Commander Ha, now serving a life sentence on a human prison world, watched the aid broadcast from his cell. The humans were feeding his people while his people starved on their frozen world. They were healing the wounded that his forces had created. They were showing more compassion to his species than his species had ever shown to others. "Why?" he asked his human guard one day. "Why do you help us after what we did?" The guard, a former colonist from New Osaka, considered the question carefully. "Because we are not you," she replied simply. "We could have become you. Many human cultures did in our history, but we chose to be better. We hope your people can make the same choice." It was perhaps the most devastating judgment possible. The humans had not destroyed the out of hatred. They had saved them out of pity. The new Galactic Constitution was signed on the first anniversary of the New Osaka Massacre. 847 species committed to principles that humanity had learned through centuries of warfare. The right to exist, the right to defend yourself, the responsibility to protect others when you had the power to do so. Ambassador read the final clause aloud. "We, the sentient species of this galaxy, acknowledge that civilization is not a birthright but an achievement. It must be earned through courage, defended through strength, and maintained through wisdom. We pledge to stand together against those who would destroy what we have built, for we have learned that evil triumphs only when good people choose to do nothing." The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. On every member world, beings of every shape and size watched their representatives commit to a new way of existence. Some wept, others cheered. All of them understood that they were witnessing history. But perhaps the most important moment came when made his final statement as Earth's ambassador. "For 37 years, we have served as guardians you never knew you had," he said. "We watched for threats you could not see. We prepared for wars you hoped would never come. We carried weapons so that you could carry tools instead." He paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. "Some of you have asked why we hid our strength for so long. The answer is simple. We hoped we would never need to use it. We hoped you would prove that civilization could exist without warriors standing guard. We hoped you would be better than us." His voice grew softer. "You were not better than us, but you were not worse than us either. You were simply inexperienced with evil. Now you have that experience. The question is, what will you do with it?" The assembled delegates rose in unanimous agreement. They would stand with humanity. They would defend the innocent. They would ensure that never again would evil flourish while good people looked away. In the depths of space, human ships continued their eternal patrol. They moved silently between the stars, watching for threats that might emerge from the dark. They carried weapons that could reshape reality itself, but they hoped never to use them. For humanity had learned the greatest lesson of all. True strength was not the ability to destroy your enemies. True strength was building a civilization where enemies chose to become friends instead. The galaxy was finally learning that lesson too. And in the shadows between the stars, other predator species watched and decided that perhaps there were easier prey elsewhere. The humans had made their point clear. This galaxy was under protection. Permanent protection,